Hello and welcome to episode 11 of the Show Me Mo School Facilities podcast, hosted by Joshua Peach, that's me, and the MSPMA Missouri School Plant Managers Association. We just did a little bit of recording muted, so this is take two. I think that the first one would have been even better, but I am excited to have with me Amy Roderick. And this is an interesting guest because Amy is not a school facility professional.
Correct.
And this is her first board meeting. We're going to dig right into that. And first and foremost, welcome. And thank you for saying no to doing a podcast and then saying yes. This is your first podcast, correct?
It is not.
Oh, it isn't.
It's my first one with you.
Okay.
Thank you for asking.
Oh, okay. Well, now I always like to know what I'm doing. I always like to know what I've got here. I would,
Right.
So you're a seasoned professional in
I have had a
podcasts.
few.
Okay, well, hopefully this is going to be one of your more favorite ones because this is a complete ad lib. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right. So my name is Amy Roderick, and I'm the director for Missouri School Boards Association Center for Education Safety. In that role, we are the state's Center for Education Safety that provides school safety resources, training, guidance, recommendations, assistance, whatever it might be to all of Missouri's schools. I did not start in education, so this has been a new transition for me. My background is in public safety, so I was a probation parole officer for many years. Then I was the chief investigator for the Attorney General's office in our public safety division, working criminal cases. And then I was the inspector general for the state of Missouri.
Wow.
And then when I retired from the state, MSBA approached me and convinced me to come into this role as the director for the center.
Very cool. I did not know any of that.
Yeah.
That is quite the resume and the route to get to where you are today.
It is an interesting route. It is.
So tell us more about the Center for Education Safety. I know you're providing resources and help for all the school districts in the state. What does that mean?
So that means a lot.
Yep.
We touch all areas of school safety. So it might be threat assessment, it might be environmental health, emergency operations, behaviors, concerning behaviors, suicide prevention. I mean, anything that can connect to creating safe environments. And so through an agreement with Missouri Department of Public Safety and Missouri Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, we're designated as the state school safety center. We don't have a governmental agency that oversees school safety efforts in Missouri. So we work with them. They're two of our biggest partners, but we work with local, public, private, federal organizations, other states on comprehensive school safety planning and development.
And does that include nature acts of, tornado preparedness and gas explosions, like everything all encompassing?
Yes. Yep. So when schools are planning, looking at those threats through their emergency operations plans, we provide a risk assessment tool. And so they can look at all those threats that could be potentials. And yes, they need to be including those things. If they live near a railroad track, they need to think about what if there's a derailment. Because most of your emergency situations are going to be weather related, some other kind of event such as that, and not actually what we typically think in school safety.
Right. Well, that's the big thing is everybody's thinking, it's a active shooter. That's the first thing. It's really not. It's I mean, the worst tragedies that have hit schools were tornadoes, axe storms. I think there was a train derailment, and a gas explosion.
Right.
And what's crazy is we didn't train derailments we haven't heard about for a very long time, but now all of a sudden we've got Ohio has one or two. We've got one in I think it was Michigan.
We had one in Missouri last year too.
Did you really?
Was it Northwest Missouri?
Was it a bad one?
It was a bad one. Yeah.
Wow. I saw the trains. We were over in Turner, Kansas. We saw all the different train rails, and I was amazed. I'm from Boston. We don't have the hub of trains, freight trains that go along. And so when we were going by that, I was thinking, wow, that's kind of interesting to think about, because we just have the only thing we see is passenger trains, really.
Right.
You know, we do have freight cars and everything, but it's really a big thing there. And Joplin had a tornado. That's I think that was the deadliest tornado, and I don't know if it's in history still, but it was a bad one.
Yeah, and just that was on a Sunday. Think about what happened if that was, on a school day, the next day.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. So how long have you been doing this for MSBA?
3.5 years now.
Wow. And did they have this before? Did you create this program?
Did not create this. So yes. So prior to MSBA absorbing the Center for Education Safety, I'm going to say back in, I don't know, 95, 96, we had a retired FBI agent that came to work as Missouri's Homeland Security Director. And so he began working in Homeland Security as one of their priority mission areas. And so that started the conversation with Department of Ed, Department of Public Safety. And so they started working through school safety training and initiatives and kind of getting that process squared away. So then when Homeland Security decided that school safety as funding kind of dried up through Homeland Security, and they're narrowing their focus through domestic terrorism and those kinds of things, it wasn't deemed that school safety was a primary mission. And so when they stopped funding school safety, nobody stepped up to take that on except MSBA. And so at that time, MSBA was providing office space and some part-time people. It was a partnership between Department of Ed and Public Safety and MSBA. And when Department of Ed and Public Safety kind of stepped away, MSBA stood up and formalized the center in 2012 and took full financial responsibility for it.
You know, what's great about this is there's such a thought that schools, communities, states, organizations only pay attention to school safety when something happens, right? And unfortunately, the only thing that really takes the focus is school shootings. And it's so refreshing, and it's great to hear and see that there's organizations that are stepping up and saying, hey, we're doing all this stuff, we're going to continue this stuff, and we're not just going to do it as a reactionary, we're going to be proactive. We're going to figure out all of the different things and challenges that could cause difficulty with the school, and we're going to train and provide resources. Suicide prevention is a huge one. Mental health, that's only getting worse. And I just talked to a district that had no idea that guidance counselors were typically the communicator with kids and big keyword being guiding the students. But now schools have mental health coordinators and mental health faculty and staff that all they do is listen to kids and help kids and try to understand when they're having difficulties before the difficulty gets to be too much for them. Now, do you go to a lot of schools?
We do. We're in schools every day. This week we were in 4 different districts.
You do that
doing training all the time, depending on what school districts need. Speaking of the mental health, we train in behavioral risk assessment, which most people know that as threat assessment. We look at as there's other concerning behaviors besides someone wanting to make a violent act or commit a violent act on a school. And so we train districts to formulate those multidisciplinary teams, start looking at the context of what that behavior is, getting to the root of that, and then developing a case plan for managing that student for however long it takes to manage that student. And so that's an industry standard. And that's a priority for us to make sure schools have those multidisciplinary teams in place.
Yeah, it's amazing. Are you familiar with the company Gaggle?
Yes.
I never would have thought that was something that you needed. You know, and they talk about hundreds of lives saved just by looking for keywords and addressing that. I'm just blown away that's a world we live in today, that you need to have technology to basically look for triggers or keywords to try to prevent or help someone from doing.
And it's the same thing, from as crime analysts and intel analysts, when you're looking at terrorism, it's the same concept. You're just putting it at that school level to look at those behaviors that could harm a child, harm others, harm property. Same concept that we've been doing in the intel community for years. We're not doing that in schools.
And so when it comes to going to schools or helping schools, are they reaching out to you, or do you reach out to them, or is it a combination of the two, or is there a cyclical program where you go, all right, we're in Lee Summit, so every April we're coming out to Lee Summit and we're going to sit down with them and we're going to do an assessment or do a checklist. I'm assuming you have some sort of checklist that you give them, or
well, kind of. It's both. We reach out to schools, they reach out to us. We provide a school safety academy. So Missouri law requires each district to have a school safety coordinator to become knowledgeable in state, local, and federal school violence prevention resources, and then relay those resources within your district and implement with what fiscal abilities you have or capabilities that you have. But there's nothing that says, what does that mean to be knowledgeable in that?
Yeah.
So we applied for a federal grant, and we have a federal Stop School Violence grant, in which we stood up an academy. So we have a 20-hour basic academy that walks you through 30,000 foot of what comprehensive school safety planning and development is in some of those priority areas. And then once they complete that, then they become a school safety specialist certified under Missouri School Boards Association. And then they have continuing education hours that they do annually. And so once they go back to their district and walk away with their next steps, go back and assess where are we at in these areas, then we help them plan and set action plans and program or train or whatever it is they feel they have a gap. And so we work with schools from there in continuing that developmental process.
So the continuing ed hours, are they required for a certain number of hours, or is it
8 hours a year? Yeah.
That seems pretty fair.
It is reasonable. Yeah. In fact, some schools are like, you should require more. We need more. And it's like, let's start here. And some, we have those overachievers that do more. But Missouri doesn't require schools to do a whole lot or mandate around school safety. We believe in that local control. So we do our best to try to train schools. This is what the industry standard is. Here are what some requirements in Missouri are as far as statutory requirements. And help them find their way. Each district's unique. Each district has different resources. And so I really see us as a broker that we connect schools with resources, but we connect schools with other schools so they can learn from one another and share those challenges.
Yeah, Missouri's I'm learning about Missouri. As I've said in just about every episode, I'm from Boston and what I love about having my first in-person podcast is none of my guests are showering me with Chiefs logo stuff, right? I mean, Saloom Stutzer, he just had a tie that just had the Chiefs logo all over. I mean, you guys are killing me, right?
Right.
But I come out here in person and nobody's got
done that.
the Chiefs logo stuff. But so I'm learning a lot about the state, the dynamics, and it's a very interesting state because you've got my numbers might be off, but I think it's 885,000 students, give or take, in the state. Yeah. And you have about 500 school districts, but there's only like 30 school districts that are over 5,000 kids. It's the majority of schools are rural schools. And what was also interesting is I don't have the exact number, but it's a really big number of school districts are in a 4-day school week.
Yeah, we have about 150 districts that are doing 4 days.
And Independence is the first that's over 5,000 students that's moving to a 4-day, because most of them are smaller rural districts. But that has a whole nother level of complexity and challenge and difficulty that other areas in the country don't. What it was interesting was the 4-day school week. I just found out through a Missouri ASBO podcast. They had a gentleman on there that does all the research on the pros and cons. And what was interesting was this is only something that's allowed west of the Mississippi. So you have a series of complexities with that only west of the Mississippi has. So you don't have every state coming together and sharing best practices and what do you do about this and how do you because now instead of the school being open 5 days for school, all schools are open 7 days. It's only it's 4 days, which gives it 3 days where other stuff is happening. Other groups could be coming in. I suspect, I haven't done my homework on this, but I suspect that there's probably, and if it hasn't happened, it's genius in my opinion. that childcare offering for that
Mhm.
fifth day
Right.
is in schools.
Right.
That could be private
Right.
organizations just utilizing the space.
Right.
It's a heck of a business opportunity, if you ask me.
And it's an opportunity. Some schools use that fourth day for students that need that enhanced learning, tutoring, things like that.
Mhm.
They still use that fifth day for professional development for
Yep.
their staff. So it's still ongoing. There's still people in the building.
Right.
It's just, we maybe
It's
do it
just,
different.
it's just different. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
So this is all fascinating, amazing stuff that you're doing.
Mhm.
How does it fit to the Mass School Plant Managers Association? What are you doing here?
So that's so a couple years ago, I met Charlie and asked us to do some safety sessions because he wanted safety sessions at his conference. And
Yeah.
so we started engaging with and Charlie knew my predecessor as well.
Yeah.
And so on how do we connect school safety to plant managers? Well, the way everybody in that school has a role in school safety. Doesn't matter what your position is.
Yeah.
Teacher, cafeteria, school nurse, plant manager, teacher, SRO, whoever administrator has a role.
Yeah.
And so we have been engaging with our plant managers to, what's that physical safety look like?
Yeah.
Schools are going to retrofitting, glass, having protective film, or installing bulletproof glass, secured vestibules, lighting in your parking lots, bollards in front of your building so a car can't come through it.
Yeah.
Those kinds of things. And so we've been working with them on those assessments, doing those site assessments and checking for your vulnerabilities, or
Yep.
we like to say your opportunities for improvement.
Mhm.
And engaging the plant managers to be able to have a say, lead in helping to create a safe school environment,
Mhm.
and arming them with information and knowledge that they can work with their administrative staff to take to their school boards to be able to fiscally support what needs to happen in that school environment.
That's a good reason to be here.
Yeah.
I think that's a great reason. I think, yeah, and I don't see it, it's happening more around the country where safety security organizations, Wisconsin's had it for a while. They've had it for a long time where the organization's WISCA, Wisconsin Safety
Coordinator Association.
Yes.
Yes. I've met with them.
They have their conference,
Mhm.
and then immediately after, same location, same week, next day, Wisconsin ASBO has their facility management
Mhm.
conference.
Mhm.
And it's really interesting because I went there this year to the WASBO conference, but I got up there early, and I went to the WISCA conference, and I expected that there would be this whole sea of different people. And the reality was a ton of facility professionals that
Right.
were looking to learn,
Mhm.
that improve the safety and security of the schools. Their opportunities for improvement.
Right. Right.
And then the next day they went into the equivalent of the MSPMA conference,
Mhm.
what I thought was really kind of
Right.
neat and interesting. So
Well, and we train, for incident command. So that's foreign to schools. First responders, EMS, emergency management get what, incident command, where you have a mass critical event and you have people coming in and you have a command team that's,
yeah,
controlling what's going on. Well, in schools control that environment till something happens. Say it's a mass critical event.
yeah,
You've got all these first responders. Somebody's got to transition control. Then once the threat is neutralized or whatever it is,
yeah,
then transition goes back to the school, and now they need to recover and rebuild. And
yeah.
so plant managers and facility staff have a huge role in that
Oh, yeah.
process. And so we train around when you have those mass critical events,
Mhm.
your incident commander for your schools that's partnering with your first responders,
Yeah.
plant managers are the good person to be.
Oh, yeah.
They know that building inside and out. They know how to get in. They know how to get out. They know where all the shutoffs are. They just know everything about that campus. And so
Yeah.
when you're trying to resolve an issue, whether it's weather, intruder, whatever it might be,
Yep.
they're a key role in that process.
Yeah, it's they hold all the keys.
Yes, they do.
They hold
Yes,
all
they
the
do.
keys, and they're typically in those incidents. Many of the times it's the custodians that are
Mhm.
the first responder.
Right.
Well, everybody when
If-
something happens, everyone is a
the
first responder.
Yes.
But typically from an incident perspective, and I can say Rick Thorne, who was a custodian, if it wasn't for him in Sandy Hook, there would have been a lot more
Mhm.
casualties because he was in the hallway when the
Yeah.
shooter came into the building, and he ran down the hallway and he called the police. He ran down the hallway,
Right.
and yelled for people to close and lock their doors. He didn't
Right.
run into a classroom and just close the
Right.
door. He ran down the hallway and initiated everyone to close their doors and hide, which arguably saved a lot of lives.
Right.
And training your staff and
Yes.
your team and facilities to
Yes.
say, hey, you might be pushing a broom or turning a wrench, but there's a high likelihood that, storm could pop up. I mean, it does something to someone that doesn't see a lot of tornado shelters when they come out to
Right.
Missouri or Kansas, and on every wall there's an arrow with which way there's a tornado
Right.
shelter. But the likelihood that a facility professional is in the hallway when that, I'm guessing, a siren goes off,
Yep.
an alert. Now it's
Right.
phone alerts. It
Right.
used to be I'm guessing a loud horn that went across a wide area, but there's a high likelihood you're going to be the person in the hallway that's going to need to direct those frantic, anxiety-filled people that are saying, "Oh my God, where do I go?" Even though the arrow's right in front of me.
Right.
So that's great.
Yeah, they should be a key team member in those emergency operations planning meetings and developing those plans and training along with your school nurses. School nurses and plant managers and custodians and for those emergency times. But those people in those roles hear things going on in the school. Kids confide in them, and they also can be a good preventative person that can be out and about and seeing and doing these things, and they could be trusted adults for kids.
I think that in on reunification, coming off site, a lot of times they have the custodian in the front of the line guiding those kids, because those are the ones that the students actually feel most comfortable with, because they don't reprimand them. Right. As a rule, they don't. Sometimes they do, but they're not the authoritative teacher that's sitting them in a classroom and teaching them. They're the comforting person that's smiling and saying hello and doing all that. No, it's very interesting.
In 2021, we provide a Heroes Among Us award to someone within the school community that's gone above and beyond and demonstrated some kind of leadership in school safety. And we actually awarded a custodian at one of our Jackson School District as our hero among us, because of the connection he had with kids and the comfort they felt coming to him and the time he spent with them in addition to doing his job. And so he just made a difference in that school environment.
That is cool. Well, I want to transition before I let you go and get to the rest of the professional development here. Today was your first MSPMA board meeting.
Yes.
And you are one of the first, if not the first, non-facility professional that's on the board.
Correct.
How was the meeting? What did you think? Are you going to come to the next one?
It's great. I've worked with several of these people in the last couple of years, just in different ways and conferences. I've been attending the MSPMA conference for the last, actually since I've been director. Center for Education Safety always has a booth there. And so it's just really nice to engage with them on a different level. And it helps me also continue to understand how we're all connected. And how what we do and how the SRO and what the school nurse and the school safety coordinator, everything they all do connects to one another. So it helps provide me some of that additional insight on how I can keep those connections going with all of these different groups. And so this is a great group to work with.
It is. I mean, I got to be a fly on the wall. I was in the back of the room for the board meeting, and it's my third board meeting that I've been able to do that. Well, I don't sit at the big table. I don't sit at the big table. I sit in the back and I just observe, and I'll occasionally, if asked, I'll say something, or occasionally I'll get on my soapbox without being prompted to. But no, it really is a great group. The synergy, the camaraderie. I was talking to Josh Schaefer this morning on the podcast, and I shared with him, I says, like, everybody checks their ego at the door. Like, it's just it seems like I don't know how they did it, but they figured out how to find complementary trying to think of everyone has a complementary piece to them. And it's like, not everyone does the same thing. All have different skills that they bring to the table, but they all have this servant leadership. What can we do? All hands on deck. mindset. It's just really cool to watch. So
Yeah.
welcome to the board, and thank you.
Thank you.
for being a part of the board. Thank you for all that you do with the schools in Missouri. And I'm sure that your work and your efforts are also seen in other parts of the country, and that they're making a difference, not just in your community, your state, but the country, doing what's most important, which is keeping our kids and our communities that are using those buildings and spaces as safe as possible. So this has been great. I took 2 pages of notes. I'm just jotting down here. And I learned so much about you, and I look forward to learning from you more and seeing you in September at the fall conference. You're going to have
I will be here.
you're going to have some specific safety sessions. I think they're earmarked just for you. That's safety specific. And if anybody wants to get a hold of you, because this is a well, I should say, I just ran the kind of the where are people listening map. And I made a comment about 3 weeks ago that was like 90 some odd % of our listeners were all in Missouri, which is great. We've got a couple thousand views and downloads on 8 podcasts, which means we get a couple hundred on each episode. But we're getting people from outside of Missouri. But if a Missouri school wants to get a hold of you, what's the best way for them to reach you or schedule, or say, hey, I need some help, or you've been out to help me and I need a tune-up?
Right. So you can go to the Missouri School Boards Association website. There's a Center for Education Safety block. You click on that, you can find our information, or anyone can call me at 573-638-7501 extension 420. I'm happy to help. We also help other states too. Like you mentioned, around, I'm the chair for the National School Safety Alliance, where all points of contact or school safety directors, we meet twice a month. And we talk about these very things, challenges across the nation, trends, legislation. We share policies, procedures, templates. And so then I'm able to bring that back to Missouri and give some more examples to show our schools you're not in this alone.
And it can be overwhelming.
It is,
because it's
very
just
safety
is just such a very busy place. There is no one best practice, and there's a lot of things that work. There's some things that don't work. There's some things that work in one school but don't work in another. So it's really a lot of there's definitely a lot of peer sharing and everything that makes a huge difference. Well, this has been great. I'm going to get I'll get your contact information and the website on the show notes, and thank you for giving me some of your time. This in-person podcast stuff is really going well for me. I have no Chiefs memorabilia. Nobody brought me any little Mahomes bobbleheads. I didn't give anybody a heads up. Truth is, I didn't give any of our guests a heads up. So for those of you watching on YouTube, I've literally just been grabbing these people today because they're awesome, and I want to have them on the podcast to share with you. And I don't take no for an answer. So I allowed you to say no this morning, and then I had Charlie, my pit bull. I told Charlie, he put you on a list. So he said, you want to have Amy on the podcast? And I said, I asked her, and she said no. And Charlie said, okay, well, we'll see about that. Let's get lunch, and then we'll do the podcast. So
I'm happy to do anything for them. This is a wonderful group, and I'm really excited to be a part of it.
Well, we'll have you on again in September, and look forward to seeing how you're progressing and how the board meetings are going and all that fun stuff. So this has been a great episode. As you can see, Missouri School Plant Managers Association is really thinking outside the box. They're not just making sure that everybody that comes to the table is all the same. They're doing all the things that you would want an association to do to maximize a student, a faculty member, a community citizen, anyone that's using these school facilities for any purpose, to giving them the absolute best facility experience that they can. That's safety, healthy, cleanliness, everything, all encompassing. And Amy's proof positive of that, because I don't know a lot of associations that have done this, and I'm excited to see the expansion and growth of this. And in the meantime, if you like what you hear, we would love your 5-star rating and review on the podcast platform of your choice. Follow us on YouTube. If you can follow us on LinkedIn, we're going to start as soon as we hit to that threshold of followers, we can start doing our podcast live, where we can do question and answer, which will be great. But in the meantime, have a great day, and be sure to reach out to Amy and her team if you need some help.
Thanks, Josh.
Thank you.